Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me for this brief introduction to Arizona legislation. I am flying solo today. I'm Gatel Sear, the Advocacy Committee Vice Chair. Penny can't be with us today. So you'll have to rely on me for all of the Zoom shenanigans and hope everything goes well. This program is designed to help you navigate the legislative process in Arizona. I know some of you are new to Arizona, some of you are new to working with the League on legislative analysis. Some of you are new to following legislation on your own. I mean, this little presentation should hopefully answer a lot of your questions. And speaking of questions, since I am on my own here, I'm going to ask that we hold questions till the end, and if you could just put them in the chat. I hope that works. It's hard to, I only have one screen, so it's kind of hard to navigate without a co-pilot here. So, but if you're having any difficulty either hearing or something, just unmute yourself and say something. So this is called By the Book and Behind the Scenes for a very good reason. The first part of this program, legislative analysis, legislation is supposed to go through the process in Arizona, and it is literally from this book that I have gotten most of my competency, such as it is, and all of my knowledge. This is a wonderful book that was written back in 2000 by a senator, and it's From Idea to Bill to Law. So if you have an interest in digging a little deeper into the process, terminology, why things are done a certain way, I would highly recommend this. I have the link on the side of the slide, so you can go take a look at it. You can poke around. You can read it. I mean, it's about 200 pages, but it's a very thorough and actually very, very useful. So I just want to start with that. So let's talk a little bit about the legislature. So this is all by way of background for those of you who are not familiar with it in Arizona. It is like 48 of the other states and U.S. Congress. It's bicameral. We have an upper house, a Senate, and a lower house, lower chamber, and that's the House. And we have, as I'm sure you all know, 30 legislative districts in Arizona. Each district has one senator and 2 representatives. So we have a total of 90 legislators in our legislature. The term of office is 2 years. And that is short compared with other states. But every seat is up every 2 years. So think of it this way. You have an opportunity every 2 years to vote on your legislators, like them, love them or hate them. You can try to keep them in, you can try to get them out, but you do have the ability to vote every 2 years. Every seat changes, or every seat is up for re-election in even number of years. So 2024 is going to be the entire legislature and quite a lot of other races, and we'll cover that in another program. But there's going to be a lot on your ballot in 2024. There are term limits, but they're pretty generous term limits. They're 4 terms, 8 years. So you can have the same representative, the same senator for those 8 years. If they get reelected, they can also run, and I've seen this happen. They can also, another legislative cycle has passed, so they have to wait another 2 years, but they can run for the other chamber. So for those legislators who are truly dedicated to staying in the legislature and popular enough to get reelected, they can switch from the Senate to the House and then back to the Senate again. And what I find interesting about that is our legislature is considered a part-time legislature, which is different from, well, I'm from the New York, New Jersey area. They're full-time legislators there. In Arizona, they get paid $24,000 a year, and that has been the same for quite a number of years. And from the time of the founding of the state, the expectation was that legislators were doing other things. They were farmers, they were bankers, they were businessmen. They were all men, of course, when the state was founded. And so that has continued to this day, this is considered a part-time legislature. So, and as you can see, and as I'm sure you know, even if you've only been in Arizona for 5 minutes, we are the legislature, Republicans are in the majority, but by a very slight majority. And that has been the case, I believe, for at least roughly the last 10 years, that the Republicans have been in a majority, sometimes with a large majority. I think often with a large majority than they have now. And the legislature runs on a very strict calendar. And I guess partly, and this is also ties into the idea that this was a part-time legislature, it is designed to last 100 days. I mean, it can last longer. And in 2023, those of you who were following legislation this past year, it didn't adjourn until July 30th. So that was one heck of a long legislative session. I think the second ever in the state's history. But the session always starts, and we're in the 56th legislature's second session, and it lasts by law. Most of the legislative calendar is dictated by the Arizona laws. Some of it is by rules of the two chambers, and it is intended to last at least until CNADA, which is without a day in Latin, basically means without a date, just gets around to adjourning. A lot happens between January 8th and the 100 days, which I think this year is April 30th or something like that. Again, because there was a part-time legislature and people had a farm and people had to do whatever else they did, they couldn't be sitting around in a, horse trading and passing bills. So it's designed to be a very short session, which again is very different from other states. The leadership is always a majority party. And so last year and this year, the Senate president is representative from Gilbert, Warren Peterson, and the House leadership, the speaker, is Ben Toma, who's a Republican from Peoria. The committee chairs and the committee chairs and the committee members, very important to the work we do. However, we don't know yet if they will be the exact same as last year. Typically in a 2-year session, which this is the second of 2 years, the committee structures don't change, the chairs don't change, the members don't change unless there's unless somebody resigns. So, but they haven't posted them. So I didn't want current 2024 committee composition once the session starts. So I wanted you to have that. And needless to say, the leadership controls so much of what goes on in the legislature. And at the end of the day, if a bill is going to make it through, it has to have the blessing of the legislative leaders, the speaker, the president, the committee chairs. The leadership appoints all those people. And so the fate of any piece of legislation is completely in their hands. And this is just a slightly more fleshed out legislative calendar for your reference. We're not going to go through it. Let's talk about types of legislation. So we talk about bills. And bills bills are what we follow. The legislative analysis teams, the issue teams that work on state issues. We mostly follow bills. There are a couple of exceptions, but the bills are the predominant type of legislation. And they have they have a naming convention like any other state that you may have lived in. Senate bills are all SB, start with the number 1, 4 digits. House bills are all HB, start with the number 2, 4 digits. So if you only see a bill number and not an SB or an HB, you will know which chamber it belongs to. Now, here's the interesting and important thing to know. Bill numbers start over every year. So it's a 2-year legislative session, and it's the same senators and representatives by and large for those 2 years. However, the bill's numbering starts over every year. So, for example, if you were following the bill in 2023, and it was Bill HB 2001. And it didn't make it through. It died in, because bills that weren't, if they weren't signed into law in 2023, they're well and truly dead. Forget the numbers you remember from 2023. They're not going to be the same bill in 2024. The same idea may come back. The same bill, the language may be identical, or if the legislators are smart about it, they will modify it enough to make it palatable to try to get it through a second time around, but it'll be a different bill number. Why it's done that way, I don't know, because that is very atypical for state legislatures. So the other types of legislation are resolutions, and there's only one that we're going to discuss, and that's concurrent, and memorials. The simple resolutions, joint resolutions, memorials are not, they don't change the law. So from our legislative analysis perspective and the advocacy work we do, we don't concentrate on those. We don't follow those. Some of them may well be of interest to you personally, because they name streets, or they name statues, or they honor people, or they do, they instigate study commissions and all kinds of other things, but we don't follow those. The one we do follow are concurrent resolutions, and those can be used for a variety of things, but the key impact of a concurrent resolution from our perspective is that it is used to get a law in front of the voters on the ballot to either amend the law or the Arizona Constitution. And it's a way to do it that doesn't require gathering of signatures, so as you might be familiar with. So, in fact, let me talk a little bit about ballot measures here. So ballot measures are always on the ballot in November of even years. So this is going to be a year in which we will have ballot measures. The ones that the legislature refer, first of all, the way it works is usually they write the same ballot measure in both chambers, or very similar ones. And then at some point in the process, one chamber agrees to adopt the other one. So in effect, they don't have to really cross chambers, which we'll talk about as bills do, but each of the two chambers approves this concurrent resolution to either change the Arizona law or change the Arizona Constitution. It doesn't go to the governor. It goes to the Secretary of State, and it goes directly onto the ballot. There's no, like with the Arizona for Abortion Access, or if you remember the Stop Off Money ballot measure, those were citizens initiatives. Those require a lot of money to get a campaign going, and then a large number of valid signatures to get on the ballot. And that assumes that they survive court challenges, which there are often court challenges against them. The legislative ones, they don't have any of those hurdles. They simply are on the ballot. So far there are 4 that will be on the ballot in November. And once the legislature is in session, there may well be more. This is one way for the legislators to avoid sending a piece of legislation to the governor. Sorry. So key steps in the legislative process. Let's talk about this a little bit. So you probably have at one point or another in your adult life said, this is so stupid. Why isn't there a law about this? Or who wrote this law? Or why can't we change this law? Citizens actually can have some impact on legislation. It's our ability to make policy or have policy changes made are pretty small, but ideas do come from a lot of sources. The legislators in their wisdom often have their own ideas about what would be good policy, good law. Businesses, of course, a lot of the ideas come from the state itself and state agencies. A lot of it is special interests, study groups. there was you it may often see in the newspaper that that the governor has convened a study group to look at certain issues. The idea is that from that will come ideas and language for laws. One thing that is, it's not unique to Arizona, but Arizona has been sort of ground zero for model bills from an organization called American Legislative Exchange Committee, I believe, which is affectionately, what they do is they write, and these are conservative, this comes from the conservative policy side. They write bills that can actually be copied and pasted, literally, into a bill in other states. And it's a way to promulgate their conservative agenda. And Arizona has used some of those bills. Some of our legislators are on the ALEC board of directors or board of governors and go to the ALEC meetings. So there's a very strong connection with an organization like ALEC, which is attempting to get their conservative policies adopted in many states. And there are also organizations like the Heritage Foundation, which doesn't write model legislation, but who promotes conservative policies with ideas for bills themselves. Legislators don't write the bills. None of these people actually write the bills. The bills are written by the Legislative Council staff, which is an arm of the legislature. The Legislative Council is a bunch of senators and representatives. They don't write the bills. The council, most of whom, if not all of whom, are lawyers, actually draft the bills. They also do other things for the legislature, but one of their key jobs is to actually write the bills and making sure the bills are constitutional and they follow all the requirements and forms and format that is necessary. And I want to mention readings. That's not a specific step in the legislative process, but Arizona, again, by law, requires that every bill must have 3 readings. And a reading is sort of a step in the process or a signal that a step in the process is about to happen. So the first or second read always refers the bill to a committee, and the third is always the final vote on the floor and whether to pass it. And the reason I mention it is because if you're following legislation closely, you're going to see first read, second read, third read. So I wanted to give you an idea of what that meant. But the actual steps are these. So bills are introduced, dropped in the hopper. I just like this expression. It's from, I don't know how long ago, before things were done electronically, when a legislator had a bill in his or her hand and actually dropped it in I believe, a wooden box in the House or Senate. So that's the first step. The bill has to be introduced. Well, the first step is the bill has to be drafted, but we've done that already. So the next step is bills have to be introduced. And in Arizona, there is something called a pre-filing period, which starts before the legislative session starts. And this year it was November 15th, 2023. In election years, it's not until mid to late December because the results of the election have to be certified. We have to make sure that only our actual certified legislators are writing introducing legislation. This year was not an election year, so it started on November 15th. But one of the reasons is that in Arizona, legislators, there's a limit to how many bills a legislator can be the prime sponsor for. They can be co-sponsors on as many bills as they want, but to be the prime sponsor, there is a limit. The limit doesn't kick in until the legislative session starts. So from pre-filing on, they can be prime sponsor on as many bills as they want. And I mean, there are a lot of reasons for that. One, I guess the key one is if your bill is successful, you want it to be known as the Smith bill. If you're this prime sponsor, that's how the bill's going to be known. But it also gives people an opportunity just to be able to say their constituents, I sponsored this many bills. it allows them to take even half-baked ideas and just get them basically, in the hopper. But nothing can happen on those bills until after the legislative session starts. So as many bills as there have been, and they're typically a couple hundred, they get filed before the legislative session starts. Some people just like having the first number, lowest numbered bill. So that's why we start to follow bills in the pre-filing period, but a lot of it, as I said, is kind of half-baked ideas, and some of them are technical corrections and don't appear to be significant. So, but it's something that you should know about if you're going to be involved on a more in-depth level on following legislation. So the next step is a bill gets referred to committee, and it may not get referred to committee, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But if it goes through its normal process, if it goes through the full process, the next step would be referred to committee, and the committee will then possibly hold a hearing on it. And hearings are where we come in, for example, as citizens or Arizonans. We don't have to be citizens; we just have to be Arizonans to speak out on the bill through RTS, through request to speak. And I'll talk about this a little later, and we have another RTS session coming up in January for those of you who have not attended one. But hearings are this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where league lobbyists, volunteer lobbyists submit, testify in public. This is where you as an individual can do the same. If there's a bill that you care about, remember, this is a league thing. Even if you're a league member and if you're not a volunteer or lobbyist for the league, you can't say, I oppose this bill for this reason, and I'm a member of the league. But you could and should, on your own behalf, both RTS, and if it's a bill you care greatly about or policy you care greatly about, you can testify. During the hearing process, amendments might be offered. And then the fate of the bill is then decided at the end of the hearing. It either passes as amended, it fails, or it's held. And there is some formulaic language that's used for passing. It's always DP for do pass, DPA, do pass amended, and then fail and held. And the bill might be held. And what I've seen is bills are often held if, for example, remember the majority has a very slight edge. So if, for example, and the committees are usually 7 people, and since the majority party appoints the committee members, they can't be all majority, so they can't all 7 be Republicans, but they can be 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So very often the committee, if not always, is really weighted towards the majority party. If substance and they don't feel they can get that bill actually voted on and passed, they will hold it. And then vote in the hearings, the vote is by roll call. So every legislator votes individually. If you're watching the hearing or attending the hearing, you could see the votes. And this is all a matter of public record. The hearings are a matter of public record. If you're interested in a hearing, you can watch it live online. You can also watch it after the fact. There's a whole archive of hearings. But this is all a matter of public record. How a legislator votes in a hearing on a bill is a matter of public record, and that record is kept. You can go back on the Arizona Legislature website and find that information if you're interested. After it makes it out of committee, it goes to the Rules Committee. Every bill has to go to the Rules Committee. Every bill that has been passed out of committee has to go to Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is set up only to address whether the bill's constitutionality, whether it's constitutional and proper form. That's all they do. They do not discuss the merits of the bill You can actually in RTS, you can actually RTS, we use that as a verb. You can, nobody's going to really care, my personal view, because they're not addressing the merits of the bill, and you can't testify. The committee hearings are public, but you can't testify. The next step is the caucus, and both majority and minority caucuses meet constantly. So they're for a variety of reasons, but there is a step in the process when it looks like the bill is going to go to the floor that the majority and the minority caucuses meet to go over the bills. Again, now we're talking about dozens of bills. I doubt if there's any legislature, no matter how diligent, knows every bill that she may vote on. And so this is an opportunity to learn about the other bills. Some of them actually look at the RTS. Again, that's a matter of public record too. So the legislators can look at RTS and see what the constituents are saying about a bill, or what the balance is between for and against. They discuss their party positions, and there's a lot of, sort of haggling for, you vote for my bill, I'll vote for your bill kind of stuff. This is not a formal step in the process. There's no action taken, there's no vote, but it's an important step in the process for the legislators. And the next step is it goes to the floor, which is the Committee of the Whole, known in Arizona as COW. And that's the floor debate, the entire chamber, all the senators, when it's in the Senate, all the senators, when it's in the House. And amendments can be proposed at that point also. And the public can and should attend. And if you're interested in a piece of legislation, effective, this was one of the ways that the Save Our Schools group a couple of years ago, more than a couple, got really widespread attention for showing up. You show up in your T-shirts and your branded gear, and it's a very powerful way to show support or opposite, support for your position, whether it's for or against. Typically, those bills are voted on a voice vote. So, all in favor say, all in favor say. There are occasions when sometimes they do a roll call, but it's typically a voice vote. And then bills just pass on a simple majority. There are two exceptions that I know about. One is you need a higher threshold to raise taxes, and an even higher threshold to change a voter's ballot initiative. So, talking about the people's right to know, the Stop Dark Money one. If the legislators wanted to change that, they can't repeal it. But if they wanted to change it, and supposedly, well, the law is they can only change it to make it better. They would need a 3/4 vote on the floor to move that bill forward, the bill to change a voter's initiative. So it's a higher threshold as well. Okay, now we come to what I call the rinse and repeat cycle. Everything happens over again. It's made it through the first chamber, it goes to the other chamber. There is a period of time in the middle of the legislative session that's called crossover week, which is when the bills go back and forth from one chamber to the other. And all the previous steps are repeated, and they have to go through the same steps. They have to be hearings again and so forth, and floor votes and so on. And the bill, again, the bill can be amended. If the sponsor is not happy with the amendment, it can go to a conference committee, which is where they try to hammer out the differences in the language. It goes back to Cal, which is where the final read is. We have a intern who worked as a page in 2023, and she knows all this from having worked in this area with us. And she said when she was actually there, she said she was amazed at how many times the legislators did a slight iteration of the same process. So it was the whole cow vote and getting it on the calendar and then voting. And then she had 5 different steps. So this is a simplified version of what actually happens. Governor has 5 days to act during the legislative session and 10 days if the legislature is already adjourned. And she doesn't have a pocket veto option, which is very common in other states, whereas if she doesn't sign it, it doesn't become law. In Arizona, the governor can sign it. She can allow it to become a law without signing, sort of the opposite of a pocket veto, or she can veto it. And the legislature can override a veto by a 2/3 vote, but only if they're still in session. So here's another interesting point. The effective date, bills don't go into effect right away unless there's some emergency provision in there that requires it. And I think that's fairly rare. So it goes into effect a full 3 months after adjournment. So the bills that the legislature that adjourned just this past July 30th, it was end of October before any of those bills went into effect. Okay. I'm not going to go through this. This is just a visual for you as a reference, the whole process we just discussed, and significantly the RTS piece, since that's what we as citizens or Arizonans can do. Right here, it's a very short window between the time the bill is actually on an agenda and the time right after the hearing. So you sometimes you have less, it's 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, it depends, very short. We can talk more about that in the RTS session. So what could possibly go wrong, right? This is a system that has been around forever. We've had thousands of laws passed. Okay, so we'll start with let's start with the worst thing that happened, and those are strikers. And strikers is basically a shorthand for strike everything, which means you take a bill that has, typically it's a bill that's been through this entire process. That's one of the reasons strikers are used, and they're most often found at the very end of the legislative session. So you take this bill that is either going nowhere or was introduced specifically with the intention of being a vehicle if their party needed a striker. And some of those technical correction bills I mentioned at the very beginning during pre-filing that's partly what they're intended for. They're just like a blank slate. So what that means is you've got a bill, everything after the enacting clause is removed, and an entirely different bill is replaced with an entirely different bill. It doesn't have to relate to it's not an amendment, so it doesn't have to relate to the bill, an existing bill. It's an entirely new bill. And it's used for a whole variety of reasons, mostly to get around the full cycle of legislative treatment. Typically, I mean, these bills have gone through hearings already. So you take a bill that was a dud or for some reason never got passed. You could change the language slightly. You can use the same language. You stick it on another bill, and it's already gone through the legislative process. Now, the governor can still veto it, but it is a way to circumvent that process, a way to revive a bill that got nowhere or was voted down in its original form. So if it was voted down it didn't make it out of committee, it can't go anywhere. But you can take that bill that didn't go anywhere and make it a striker on another bill. And they are very tricky to track because, so for example, it's a bill that you've been following through the legislative process. You will know if it becomes a striker. It depends on how closely you're following it, but you will see it if you're following it on the legislative website, and it has a different short title. And so you'll know that the bill that you have been following is now a bill about, I don't know, lead pipes. So you're no longer interested in that bill, and you say, okay, that bill's not going. I don't care. That's not my bill anymore. The flip side, and this is where we often get caught, is it's a bill we're not following. So let's say I'm on the voting rights issue team, And it's a bill about lead pipes, and we're not following that because that has nothing to do with voting rights. And that bill is used as a striker, and it now has language that we care passionately about, but we weren't following it. So how do we know? And in our case, sometimes, the coalitions we work with have, more boots on the ground and know when this kind of stuff is happening. We usually find out, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time before we say, wait a minute, that bill, we care about that bill now. And I did a little strikers by the numbers there for you. So you can see that most of the strikers that get proposed, a large percentage of them do get adopted. So once the striker is in the system, there's a very good chance it's going to become law, whether you like it or not. The other technique that sometimes happens is that bills that have gone nowhere, even some of you may remember the permanent early voting list, PEVL, which was around Arizona for a while. There was the attempt to, I think it was 2022, to get rid of it. And even the Republicans who proposed it, there was a Republican bill, were not fully in favor of it. And so it never really got anywhere. But it did manage somehow, to our great surprise, to show up in the budget that year. And we did not find that out right away because we don't, the budget is enormous. It's negotiated behind closed doors at the last minute. So that's another way to sneak in bills that couldn't make it on their own. And then the concurrent resolution, which I already mentioned. So let's take just a minute or two to go to look at the behind the scenes. So you've probably all heard the expression, if you like sausage, never watch it being made. Well, that's what this is all about. So how the sausage is made. And some of this we kind of talked about already. Most of the legislation is drafted before the session starts. And special interest groups, lobbyists who represent the special interest groups, they draft at least half the bills that pass because, as we say, money talks, support for the legislators. This is endorsement for the legislators. Arizona is a very business-friendly state. Our legislators are, many of them are business owners, where the heavy influence is. Bills introduced based on the things that we think are stupid and need to be changed are in the minority. And the study committees, which used to be a lot more productive, are just not really doing much. So not only is the legislation drafted, but more significantly, the votes are decided before the committees even meet. The committee hearings rarely change the legislators' minds. This is not unusual. It's very partisan, party driven, and they tend to vote as a block. At least that has been the case in Arizona. So if a Republican introduces a bill, the Republicans are going to support that bill. So the hearings, testimony, RTS, it's all very important, but it's not the way that we're going to change the legislators' minds. To the extent that you can get information to your legislators in advance, if there's an issue you care about and you've been following it and you see that your legislator is always opposed to a bill to make a change, for example, you've got to reach out to your legislator and make it clear that you're a constituent, you're a voting constituent in his or her district, to try to make any kind of impact. That's not just Arizona. That is that. Again, the governor's bills, all the majority leaders' bills, committee chairs. We didn't see. I don't remember if we saw any. There were some Democrats bills that made it through last year, but not a lot. And of course, there's all this horse trading all the time anyway, which is, just the way it is. So, as I said, most bills don't make it into law. And this is, since I've been working in this space, I've been tracking numbers. I like to track things. So interestingly, and you can see how many bills are introduced each year. So last year was not the highest. The highest was 2021, I think, because it was coming after the COVID year. But it's for 2020, which was the height of the pandemic. We've come in at around a quarter of the bills. So there are. I'm going to talk about this a little more. There are many ways to kill a bill. Being sponsored by a minority party is one of the key ways, of course. And as I know, we all know, the governor has, she has the power to veto bills, and that's the ultimate way to stop a piece of legislation. And also, during the budget negotiation, she can negotiate about budget incentives as well. So how to kill a bill. And this is probably only 50% of the ways that it can be done. And so why don't bills survive? Well, they're never assigned to committee. There's no requirement that a bill be assigned to a committee. Again, that's up to the Speaker and the President, Speaker of the House and President of the Senate. It can be double assigned, which I always think is that bills are supposed to be on one subject. And if you double assign it to a committee, you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to assign this bill to the Commerce Committee and Natural Resources Committee. Theoretically, that shouldn't be possible if it's only on one subject. But that is done in some cases just to make sure that bill goes nowhere, because it's very, very hard. So obligation you have, or a quid pro quo with the sponsor, by saying, sure, I'll assign your bill to a committee, but then double assign it, and it has to make it through both committees. That rarely happens. Sometimes the bill is never heard in a committee, so it's assigned and it languishes. There's no hearing. It's used for striker, which we talked about. It may not make it to the floor. It can come out of committee, but it can be held for a variety of reasons. And so it never gets on the calendar for a floor hearing. So if it doesn't make it to the floor, it can't survive. Bills that have a big fiscal implication, where there's lots of money that needs to be spent to get something done, they're often don't make it either, because people are very fiscally conservative and don't want, they don't want to be like the legislators who spent all the money. It can be completely rendered useless in conference committees, I already mentioned, and of course it can be vetoed. So there are many, many ways and many reasons why bills don't ever make it through the process. So what can we do? Okay, so let's talk about us and people power. So there are things we can do, and this is where we try to engage as many of our members as possible. So we can do request to speak. We've talked about that already during all the standing committee hearings. You can support or oppose a bill. You can write a comment. You could testify. You can call, write, email, carrier pigeon, orange juice cans, whatever way you like to communicate with committee members to dissuade them from hearing the bill. Now, not when the bill is about to be heard, but again, this is all preemptive. You're following something. It keeps coming back every year. I want my legislator and other legislators to understand how important this is to us, that they not pass this bill. So we always say that it's most effective if you contact your legislator, because again, you can say, I live in your district, I am a voter in your district, and this is, what I would like you to do. Of course, the committees are only 7 people. So your legislator is unlikely to be on perhaps the committee that you care mostly about, let's say the elections committee. But you can ask your legislator to talk to his fellow legislators about the bill. So you can try to get your voice heard a little more broadly. And, writing to the governor when a bill is on the way to her desk, we have heard that that is actually fairly effective if enough people communicate with the governor about why. Usually at that point is you should definitely not sign it. Show up during floor debate. Again, use your voice on social media, tag your legislators. You can do that. We as a league can't do that. The league advocates on issues, not on, we don't call out legislators. We cannot do that. But you can do that. So, tag your legislator who is not paying attention to what the constituents care about. And one of the things we have learned is that the social media, next point I was going to make is that letters to the editor, those kinds of things, they get very little exposure. But any kind of media exposure is good because it draws attention to issues that concern us, that we're upset about. And that sometimes brings the pressure could affect us and our economic abilities and issues like that. And it could affect our local businesses as well. So any pressure from the business community can be effective because that's who the legislators really listen to. So any way that we can negotiate for that is valuable. And then obviously vote. That goes without saying. So I just have our next steps, 2 slides. So again, part of this effort is to encourage you to join the legislative analysis or any one of our other advocacy efforts. So, and what we always say is no experience, no problem. The fact of the matter is you all have experience. None of us are infants. So everybody's got some experience. And I can tell you from doing this 4 years and working in a lot of different areas on state and Metro Phoenix issues, I am always blown away by the level of experience and types of experience that our members bring to all of these projects, all these campaigns. So don't even think about the fact that you've never done this before. You all have something to contribute. I always say, I'm behind the scenes girl. If you're front of the house, that's fine. We could find more visible things for you to do. If you like to work behind the scenes, wonderful. We have a lot of projects that we can put you on. If you have a little bit of time, if you have a lot of time, it doesn't matter. We do a lot of training and we really encourage involvement. You can join an issue team by clicking on that link. You can sign up for a request to speak login if you don't have one by clicking this link. You can email us at that email address if you want to get involved. For those of you who have not been closely involved, every year since the legislature has new bills every year we reevaluate our priorities based on and we can only advocate in areas for which we have a lead position. So and every year that I've been doing this, it's more or less the same list, sometimes slightly different order. Voting rights is always, top of the list because that's the rights is very high. Education, all of these are. We have issue teams for all of these. So if you're interested in any of these or want to do other work to support this work, we have a place for you. So I have one last slide that has just some useful resources. And our next RTS training is January 12th from 5 to 6. And that's the link to register. You do have to register in advance. And I really, really encourage you to take our session. If you've taken someone else's RTS session, a lot of organizations offer it, that's fine. They're wonderful. But I try to spend a little time on some of the resources that you can use if you actually want to follow the bills. If you want to do more than just RTS, if you want to actually know more about the bill process, the content of the bill, the sponsors and so forth. I do a little bit of training on that as well. So I'm going to stop sharing and get back to trying to find all of you. Let me get my gallery back. Okay, great. I see you all. I think there was a question. Let me look at the chat first. Okay. Question, will the recording of this session or at least the slides be available? Yes, it is recorded and I will make that available and I will send the slides to everybody who registered after the session and all the links will be live, so you'll be able to go through it. Let's see. Are the bills that get introduced before the legislature starts available to read on the website? So yes. Yes, and I will, actually, let me see if there are any other questions, and then if I have a couple minutes, I will actually go and show you where to find those. Okay, Beth, yeah, you have a question.
Yeah, you had mentioned about that there were term limits and that they could be 8 years, I think. And so can they serve 8 years as they say the senator and then 8 years as the House and then 8 more years as the senator? It just goes back and forth like that?
Theoretically. I don't know why anybody would, but yes, theoretically.
I don't know
Yes, yeah, there's nothing in the law that precludes that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Find another question. Let me see. How often is the bill status Google Doc updated? Ah, good question. Theoretically, all the time, once the legislative session starts. I think we have issue teams and each issue team handles it a little differently. But our tracker, which some of you have seen and others have not, is our master spreadsheet of all the bills that we're following. And it has columns for each of the steps in the process and where the bill is in the process for both chambers. So it's up to the issue teams to figure out how, who, and how often they're going to update that. I am delighted to say that our issue teams all have some of our very talented interns assigned to them, 2 of whom are on the call, Haley and Emra. So they will be able to do some of that work for them as well. So it has to be done manually. I mean, there's no automatic update. I guess I should have also said. So I hope that answers that question. Let me see. Is there any way we can know what bills are intended to? No. What bills are intended to be strikers? Not really. You know, there is the conventional wisdom that some of those bills that are introduced as technical corrections were really intended to be strikers, but it could be any bill. It could be, and again, it's got to be with the okay of the sponsor to say, okay, yeah, my bill's going nowhere. Just strike everything after, hereby enacted and stick your bill on it. But no, that's what makes it so challenging and sometimes a little unnerving. And again, they're bills that they may be very important controversial bills that have actually never been heard because they're stuck on a bill that's been heard on the other subject. So anyway, short answer, no. Okay, anybody else have a question?
Well, I ask about striker bills. As I understand it, they can just go in and get a bill and make it totally different. Does that mean, does it have to go through the hearing process again?
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
No, that's exactly why they do it.
That is really devious. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very, I guess devious is as good a word as any for it. Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, let's see. Beth, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so wasn't there some kind of, like somebody made a commitment that they were going to eliminate strikers? Maybe it was Rusty Bowers, back a couple of sessions ago. Do you see any momentum to get rid of strikers at this point?
No. Why would they?
Well,
I mean, it benefits both parties. It does benefit both parties. Right now, it benefits the Republicans, but because Democratic bills don't get passed. But And I don't know, I think I said this at the beginning, I've been thinking about trying to figure out if other states do this. I have not come across any other state that has this, but I can't believe Arizona is the only one. They may call it something else, but I mean, I know federal bills, they can add on very extensive riders that basically, you know, are critical, you know, they don't change the bill, but they don't completely change the bill, but they can change the bill. But I don't see, no, I haven't heard anything about that. Anybody else? No. I hear silence. Okay. Wait, I think I see another question in the chat. Do you recommend letters to the editor and or op-eds? It's funny, in the old days, before social media, I think they were much more popular when people actually read newspapers in print. I know that some newspapers that I read, Arizona papers, for example, online, those are not even available online. They're available in the electronic product, but not in the web product. So I feel like they get less attention. But if there is a concerted campaign, and we've done that before, we've asked our members to write in their own name, we've written letters. If that's your jam, as I say, I would go ahead and do it. I mean, any kind of shedding light on the disconnect between what we as Arizonans want and what our legislature is providing for us, I think is worth doing. And some people just like to write, so I think it's a way of communicating a concern. And as I said earlier, you know, to the extent that we can get the media to pick up, if you can get the media to pick up on issues that maybe are not getting the top level reporting, that's always a good thing. Anything else? Okay, I seeing no more hands and thinking that, yeah, I'm sorry.
I just want to thank you for a great presentation. It was so informative.
Oh, you're welcome, Doris. Thank you. Actually, Paula's I spoke too soon. Paula's got her hand up.
Oh, I was just going to say you were going to see if you could put up the link where the bills are available before the session starts.
Thank you. I'm going to do that, and anybody who's interested in hanging with us for a minute, I will. Let me see how adept I am to getting this done here. Let's see. Yeah, I have to move my camera, sorry. Okay. Move my camera again. Okay, I'm going to, it's azledge.gov. Let me see, I've got to share my screen again. Okay, let's see. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, not yet. Started.
Oh, it says it's loading.
Okay, now I can.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. This is the Arizona Legislative website. A couple of things that are very, very important. See this little yellow box up top where it says the legislative session? There we go. So see how far back you can go? Let's see. You can go back to 1989. And that includes, well, RTS doesn't go back that far electronically. It goes back in paper that far. But from the point, and I think it was in early 90s, that the RTS system became electronic, you can actually go back and look at RTS responses and comments all the way back. You can follow all bills back in other sessions. And what we sometimes do when we're doing legislative analysis, we may go back, say, to 2023 or 2022 to look at some similar bills. And if you forget to flip back, you end up being in the wrong legislative session. That was the point I was making. So make sure you're in the right legislative session. And if you go here to bills, and bill info, click on that. And this is where you'll find all the bills, not the pre-file bills, but all the bills in chronological, numerical order for the whole session. So there are House bills. You can see there are, that's not what I meant to do. I'm trying to see how many House bills were introduced so far. So 58 House bills so far. Senate bills far fewer. And Senate bills only 4. So yeah, so this is where you can, if you want to start looking now to see what's introduced, you can do that. And the information you would find, let me just pick one. Just, let's see. Okay, let's just pick this power plans one. You click on the bill number, and it takes you to what's called the bill status inquiry, which is where you find everything you need to know about the bill. Once the legislative session is in session, you will find the bill status. You can see all the different statuses it might have. You'll see videos of the hearings. You'll see RTS. You'll see the documents, which includes the introduced version and then all the variations and calendars and agendas. So this bill status inquiry is the place to go to do any kind of tracking or in-depth research. And it all starts pretty much on that page, on the AZ Ledge website page. Okay. I could do a whole session on the legislative website. There's lots of good stuff, but okay, so I'm thinking, hearing no more questions, I'm thinking we're done. I really appreciate everybody coming and attending. And I am going to send out the slide deck later today, probably, or tomorrow. And please, please, please sign up for RTS. And if there's any other training that you would find valuable, just let me know. I have a couple of extra sets of hands around with me now who can help with training. And that will be helpful. Okay. Oh, yes. Hi, Corey. Yes, you raised your hand.
Since this is going to be a year full of elections, has the legislative group or the advocacy group set up training for moderators for forums and debates?
Training, as far as I know, not yet. I know we've done some of that on the Metro Phoenix level. I will have to ask Penny. Not that I'm aware of. But I will.
But it will be in your queue sometime this year.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Okay. That's a good question. I'll get that answered. Anything else? Okay. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you for spending time
Thanks.
with me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ooh.
Thanks very much.